Scotland's deaths outnumber births, so why is the population still rising? For the same thing that we've been complaining about for about a decade now. A record number of people are living in Scotland, topping 5.5 million for the first time in 2023. But the deaths have outnumbered births for the last decade, so why is the population still rising? It is, in fact, a mystery. It's a complete mystery as to why that could be. The simple answer is more people are moving to Scotland than leaving, and most of the arrivals are coming from overseas. You don't say. You don't say. You asked a question that literally everybody knew the answer to. Literally everybody knew this. Like that's why. It's because the natives aren't having babies, but I'm going to save that part for the end. Scottish ministers say that the country's population growth depends on this positive net migration, however, it is not without its controversy. Well, yeah, you'll get a growth in population, you're not going to get a growth in GDP or money or economy or anything like that at all because, like, they're not working. Or they are working, but they're working off the books and getting paid under the table, so they're not paying taxes. So they're not actually contributing to the system at all, which, based, okay, but still the fact is, you can't turn around there and say, "Oh, we need immigrations because we need people to come in over here and work and pay taxes and blah blah blah." And it's like, look, there's one thing that Scotland doesn't need more of. It's Deliveroo drivers, right, hanging around on that little bit in Gordon Street where you always see them farting about, right? If there's one thing that we don't need, it's that. Right, if it was people coming over here to do the actual, doctors, lawyers, and engineers like stuff, then yeah, okay, but that's not what they're coming over to do. Right, if there's anything that we don't need more doctors. Like, we have plenty of doctors, they're just not working to the point where they're even threatening to go on strike over the prospect of having to actually see patients. Right, it's not that. Right, and it's like, oh, why have deaths outnumbered births? Well, partly because of the rampant drug problem that we have here. I believe that we are still we're the top in Europe per capita for drug deaths as well. I'm not sure. I'll need to check back in on that one. But despite being such a very small country, we are the top per capita for drug deaths in Europe. And also the fact is in this economy, it's just not feasible to have children. There's also been a huge breakdown in relationships between men and women. And I've been on the dating scene long enough and been married, and I can fucking tell you that with a great degree of certainty. But yeah, people just aren't having families anymore, and the ones that attempt it, you get some people that think it's what they want, and then they get faced with the harsh reality of, well, that means you actually have to put the work in, and they go, oh, this sucks. I want to go out and drink Lambrini and blah, blah, like, oh yeah. Everyone like, why the fuck do you do it then? But yeah, basically that's the problem that a lot of people are facing. We're just not having babies. We should be having babies. The government should be taking measures to make sure that we can have as many babies as possible. But instead of doing that, that sacrifices lots of people becoming little wage slaves. Right? They were like, no, we want the men and the women in the household all working and paying lots and lots of taxes. Oh, crap. Everyone's having to do 40, 50, 60-hour weeks and paying loads and loads of taxes to afford their little one-bedroom flat. So, and there's like, they're not having babies. Oh no, what are we going to do? I know, we'll bring in a bunch of foreigners. Oh wait, they're not paying taxes either. Darn. It's almost like the government has no idea what the fuck it's doing. Backdoor routes to the UK, such as people arriving on small boats, continue to hit the headlines. But it is front door routes like international student visas which account for most of Scotland's recent immigration boom. That's one that I actually don't really care about like that much. See if students are coming over here to like learn, they get their degree and then they bugger off back home. That one I don't really care too much about. I don't really. I mean, see the fact that, well, maybe at one point in history we definitely were. Scotland was the leader for anatomical study globally in like the 1800s. Back in the old Burke and Hare days. And everyone, Dr. Cox knew, and that's a hill I'll die on. But basically, like, so see if you've got like a very prestigious university, you've got like Oxford or Harvard or whatever, and like, well, they were at one point, but they suck now. But still, if you've got a very prestigious university and foreign students come over to study and get their degree and then bugger off back home, that I don't really care about. I don't really care about that because they're coming over, they're bringing money, they're spending money, and hopefully they'll bring some of those Western values back home. and ever. But the ones that come over here and then want to stay, well, no, you can go home. But we've got shit tons of foreign students. We've got tons and tons of foreign students. We've got lots of lots and lots of Chinese exchange students over here. There's tons of them. We've got loads and loads of them, and they really like me for some reason. They could just smell like, go, you libertarian, you have crypto, come on. Just complete the trifecta. Divorced, libertarian, lots of crypto, Asian girlfriend. I don't know why they like me. People leaving to build a new life elsewhere was the dominant migration story of Scotland's past, but not anymore. Immigration has been adding to the country's population for the last 24 years, and if you'll notice, the last 24 years, everything's just got worse. This means every year more people have moved to Scotland than left, with noticeable spikes at key moments, such as 8 Eastern European countries joining the EU in 2004 and Brexit in 2020. One thing I will point out as well is, remember, it was about maybe like 10 years ago or something like that, maybe longer, where there was like a massive influx of like Lithuanians and Polish and Estonians and like whoever else, and now they're all gone. Basically, Poland's economy like sucked back then, and like the job market was terrible, so they were all coming over here for work. Then this, and I deeply respect this, as soon as things unfucked themselves in Poland, they all went back home. They all went back home, and see that, I'm kind of like, aye, okay, but this is the main difference between the men in the boats and the Poles, is the Poles came over here and fucking grafted. Like, they worked. Like, there was loads of guys, there was loads of, I don't know if this was the case anywhere else, but where I was living, you got, usually at roundabouts or at places where traffic stopped on the little road barrier fences, you had loads of signs sitting up where it's like handyman for hire, van for hire, like plumber for hire, blah, 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 and it was call whatever Polish name and then a mobile number, so they were grafting. They came over here and they worked. And everyone, so see that I don't really care about. Like, I mean, I would rather have the Poles than the boat people. Right, but as soon as the Poland's economy unfucked itself and there was actual jobs and economic growth, they just up sticks and moved back. Which, that's fair. I respect that. However, the biggest increases have come more recently. A total of 68,200 people moved away from Scotland in the year to mid-2024, while 124,600 arrived, most of whom illegally. The difference between the two, known as net migration, is 56,400. And of the total, 3/4 came from overseas. National Records of Scotland analysis suggest international immigration remains historically high. How unfortunate. Separate snapshot population data reinforces the point. Scotland's population grew by 144,400, 2.7%, between the 2011 and 2022 censuses. In this period, the number of people living in Scotland who were born in the country decreased by 90,400 people. This decrease was offset by an increase in those born in the rest of the UK and overseas. At the same time, there have been more deaths than births each year since 2015. The NRS called the difference between the two the natural challenge, and they predict it will continue to widen for the next 2 decades as people have fewer children and the older population grows. And yeah, the reason that people aren't having children is to basically the breakdown of the relationship between men and women, and also the fact is it's just not economically feasible to have children. Children are expensive, yeah, and then you need to source childcare and stuff like that. One parent, basically, it was much better in the days where the man worked and the woman stayed at home and raised the children. Those were the days. Those were the better days. That's when you were getting kids that were getting raised by a parent figure instead of some faceless like nursery person and stuff like that. Basically, it's better when the kids are with their mother or with their parents. It's just much better. Instead, the mother's going, but my career, and she's going out and like basically handing over her entire paycheck to cover like the nursery or childcare costs, therefore making the job just moot and everything, and she's not getting to spend the time with her children. Right, that's what's happening, and basically they're all going, oh, this sucks, and then everybody sees the horror stories and goes, oh, fuck this, I'll wait. Don't worry, I'll wait. I'll wait, everything will be fine. And one thing, I was actually talking about this with Phil the Bonnet on Twitter just the other day. 37 and being on the dating market, you get approached by women who are roughly around the same age as you, and they are fucking panicking. they are panicking and they all want to move really fast. They all want to move really, really quickly and everything. And they're like, oh, how do you feel about kids? I want to have lots of kids. And I'm like, you're like 39. What stopped you? And I'm like, and it's like, yeah, you wanted to get fucking riled up by Stavros at the weekend while drinking Lamborghini with all your friends and taking that Ben Nevis picture on you in the streets of Florence and all that stuff. And now you're like, oh no. And it's like, I'm sorry, darling, there's no tread left in those tires. Like, why would I want you when I can get some like 26-year-old Chinese student who's just grateful for the fact I'm speaking to them? I'm kidding on. I'm kidding on. I'm not. I'm single, but I'm not in the dating market right now. Fuck that. I am avoiding that shit for a while. NRS projections suggest inward migration will continue to plug this natural change gap, and Scotland's population could be as high as 5.8 million by 2047. A total of 23 council areas are expected to see population growth in the next decade, but a further 9 will experience decline by mid-2032 if current demographic trends like falling birth rates continue. These will all be the ones outside of the city. Basically, there's loads of places up in the Highlands and out in the Fife and stuff like that that the government just does not give a fuck about. They get no investment whatsoever. The Equalities Minister, Colcab Stewart, has said that the figures show that Scotland's population growth depends on positive net migration, with migrant workers filling critical skill gaps in sectors such as healthcare and agriculture. That's a lot of shite. That's a lot of absolute utter garbage, because a lot of these jobs that the migrants are doing within the NHS, literally anybody can do. Anybody can do those jobs. It's a 2-week training course. Like, you're not a doctor, you're not like an experienced medical professional. Like, anybody can do that job. Right, and it's just a case of like nobody wants to do it because the pay's shit. The pay's shit, and this is the self-fulfilling prophecy. Basically, jobs for pay are shit, and people are already struggling, so they're like, I'm not going to go for that job, I'm going to go for the job that pays more. And they're like, oh, there's nobody to do this job, so we're going to bring in the migrants, which are going to keep the wages for that position low, which therefore creates the economic problem where people feasibly cannot have children. And there you are, there's the cycle. And the government full well knows this cycle, but they don't care. They want half the basically half the population should be at home. The other half should be working. That's the way it is. That's the way it should be. However, half the population are then not paying taxes, and the government does not like that. They're like, no, we want everybody working, so we're going to make things economically difficult on purpose, so that the other half of the population has to go out and work. Oh no, nobody's having families anymore. It's fine. We'll just bring in loads and loads of the tax slaves from abroad this time. Oh wait, they're actually Deliveroo drivers or doing XYZ, getting paid under the table and not paying taxes. It's fine. Bring in more. Like, I am determined, instead of acknowledging that this was a complete failure, I'm going to double the fuck down on it, and who gives a shit about what happens to this nation's future? Government was a bad idea. One of the main drivers of immigration to Scotland in recent years has been the arrival of more international students and their dependents. In 2022-23, an all-time high of 83,975 people from outside of the UK were studying in the country. But the number of EU students in Scotland has fallen by half, down to just 10,430 since Brexit. The overwhelming majority are all Chinese. You're even getting little mini Chinatowns everywhere. Especially in the West End around Glasgow Uni. This followed post-Brexit reforms made by Boris Johnson's government, which made it easier for non-EU nationals and their families to get visas. China remains the biggest supplier of international students to Scotland, with 17,565 enrolments last year, up from 14,275 in 2019-20. It is a huge money spinner for universities because they charge international students higher fees. Trade body University Scotland has estimated the presence of international students contributed between 4 and 6 billion to Scotland's economy since 2019, which is why I don't mind them so much, because they come over here, they pay the uni a bunch of money, they spend a bunch of money and stuff like that when they're here from their bursaries, which is usually foreign bursaries, and then they get their degree and they bugger off back home. I don't really mind that. Take some Western values with you. But the number of overseas students at Scottish universities dropped by more than 10,000 last year, and this has left some institutions reliant on them, such as Dundee University, with huge financial problems. Who the fuck wants to go to Dundee? But anyway, people also arrive in Scotland on pre-arranged visas to work, and this can range from international footballers to agriculture and care home workers. International football, come on, that doesn't count. That's like, what, 19 people? And they're here for like 4 days and then leave. I'd like, see if it's like performers, like, oh, music artists. Like, are you going to count Taylor Swift shows as part of like immigration data or something like that? It's just her. You know, like that. I don't think that should count. Like performers, footballers, or international sports players and stuff like that. Who cares? Who cares? That's a drop in the bucket. It's not even a drop in the bucket. However, the number of health and care related visas issued in recent years trebled at a UK level to plug staffing gaps before tightening of the rules. Or you could just pay people living wages. Or you could just do that. Oh, the natives don't want to do the work, yeah, because the natives live here and they know the economic model of the country and they're looking at that and they know for a fact that that is not a livable wage, so they're not going to apply for the job. Instead, grant livable wages. There's so many, it's like, the thing is, like, the average man on the street, your average taxi driver, your average bricklayer, your average construction worker, your average fucking nurse knows the things that will fix the country. And these are people that have no skill in economy or government whatsoever. They know what will fix the country because they live in it and they have observed it. I am not in government. I'm not an economist. I am none of those things. And I know these simple things will fix the country. I know it's not just a simple case of pay a living wage and everything because the NHS is government funded, right? It's basically, it's a death spiral. It's a death spiral of things that are basically the one bad thing is causing the next thing, which is causing the next thing. And the solutions for those apparent things just keep the cycle fucking going, right? And the government knows this. Everybody knows this. Bill the Brickie knows this. The taxi driver, the nurse, everybody knows this. And even though we're all screaming, stop doing these things, the government goes, no, I'm going to double down, I'm going to keep doing it, I am certain this will work, because, you know, repeating the same action over and over and expecting a different result, etc., etc. And what is not captured in any of the data is the number of unauthorised migrants living here, such as people who overstay holiday visas or rejected asylum applicants who do not leave. The UK government has not attempted to estimate this tally for more than 20 years. I wonder why. But what about refugees and asylum seekers? What about them? People seeking refugee or asylum status in the UK also come to Scotland, but the numbers are small, accounting for 0.67% of the total population. And there actually is a specific reason for that. And now, see, when they come here, refugee or asylum, see if you're from the Middle East or something like that and you're not a neighbouring country, you're not a refugee or asylum seeker. You're not. What was wrong with the 18 other countries that you passed through? What was wrong with them? Oh, their benefits laws were lax as fuck. Yeah, that's why you're not a refugee or an asylum seeker. You're an economic migrant. That's what you are. Call them what they are. Stop using the refugee and asylum. Say, oh, the poor little thing. Yeah, the poor little thing in the next nearest neighbouring safe country that they fled to. But then the country after that, and the country after that, and the country after that, the country after that, blah 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 blah. Getting a little boat all the way to Britain. Right? No, you're not. You're just not. Right, you're an economic migrant, you're a chancer. But also the reason that the numbers here are so low is a few things. Scotland's economy is shit. There are no jobs. There is a lot of competition for even the most basic minimum wage jobs. There's a lot of competition for even just them, right? So the migrants don't really stand a chance. And also, as you've seen, if you've ever walked through Gordon Street after 6 p.m, delivery drivers, there's a lot of them. We don't need more of those. And also, the fact is there's no jobs, and also the weather's terrible. And I keep citing this story just because it's that funny. There was a Syrian family that came over here, and it was a daddy's wife and his kids, and they got put on the Isle of Bute, which is a pretty place. It's very pretty for like a weekend. Right, but they got put on the Isle of Bute, and when they get interviewed going, oh, what do you think of your new life in Scotland? The Syrian dad said, this is where old people come to die. Right, and people were fucking raging at him, and it's like, me and I will jump at the chance to be angry at an immigrant, right? But, like, he's right. He's completely correct. Like, it is, like, Bute is where old people use their pension to buy their retirement home. That's what Bute is. Which is, it's a beautiful wee place, don't get me wrong. It's nice to go over there for a little weekend, do a bit of fishing and stuff like that. But to live there, no, fuck that. Also, as soon as you're on the Scottish Islands, you don't get Amazon Prime, for obvious reasons. Home Office data up to June shows 28,934 Ukrainians have moved to the country under a resettlement scheme since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In addition, a total 1,875 people are living in Scotland under the Afghan resettlement program. but it is the number of asylum seekers housed in the country which has drawn the most attention in recent months. There are total 6,107 asylum seekers in Scotland, a figure that has been steadily rising in recent years in line with the record numbers of applications across the UK. And they are being put in asylum hotels. There are 3 or 4. I know there's definitely 3, but I believe there's a 4th in the town centre. One of them is not very far from where I am right now, and it has turned the entire street into a shit pile. The street's Union Street, right? And everybody knows that Union Street is fucking bad because at the end of it is the Four Corners. Which is, see, if you just type in Four Corners news, you'll just see all the horrific shit that's happened at the Four Corners in Glasgow over the years, right? But you wouldn't think that that place could get any worse. Yeah, it is. I saw a migrant chasing 2 junkies down the street with a broken bottle. This was just like a few weeks ago, right? And the street's horrendous. And women that walk past the hotel get lecherous comments and stuff made at them to the point where whenever I have to like walk a woman home or whatever, I'm like, oh, where are you going? They're like, oh, past Union, I'll walk you home. I'll walk you. Usually, if the subway or like Central Station's not that far, I'll let them do the wee walk. But see, if they're like, oh, I'm going up Union Street, I'm like, nah, I'll walk with you. I'll walk with you. But anyway, Scotland's houses nearly houses. Oh, I've just read that. Oh no, Scotland houses nearly twice as many asylum seekers as Wales, at about 3,579 less than the Yorkshire and Humber area of England, which has a comparable size population to Scotland. There are 94,817 asylum seekers living across England. Which parts of Scotland have the most migrants? More people moved in than moved out in every council area in Scotland last year, according to NRS data. The biggest jump in net migration was in Glasgow, which grew by 1.8%, compared to mid-2023, followed by Midlothian at 1.5% and Edinburgh 1.2%. NRS analysis shows that by mid-2032, 23 out of the 32 council areas in Scotland will see their population rise, with a near 10% rise expected in Edinburgh and 14.7% in Midlothian. None of whom will be born here, or at least like a tiny, tiny little fraction of them will actually be born here because we're just not unfucking our economic model. The remaining areas, including Western Bartonshire and Inverclyde, are expected to see a fall in the number of people living there. Ross Bondy, senior lecturer in sociology at the University of Edinburgh, has produced an analysis of the 2022 census, which shows that 1 in 10 respondents were born outside of the UK, up from 3.8% in the 2001 census. The majority of people arriving from overseas are under the age of 25, and many are concentrated in cities, his study shows. The council wards with the highest proportion of population born outside of the UK. York Hill, Glasgow. Population born outside of so this is Anderson City and York Hill in Glasgow. 41.4%. 41.4% are born outside of the UK. That's nearly half of an entire area of Glasgow. Most common non-UK country of birth, China. But a lot of those will be temporary students. George St Harbour, Aberdeen, 37.8%. So again, approaching half. Nigeria. Council Ward Edinburgh, 36.3%, most of whom is China, but again, that is students, and a lot of them do bugger off. Like, they don't want to stay here. Mr. Boyne points out that the council wards in Glasgow and Edinburgh, where China approves the highest number of migrants of any single country, is likely a result of large numbers of international students, similarly with the high number of Americans in St Andrews. Now, this is another thing that I do want to point out as well. Now, the main reason that a lot of people don't really care about the Chinese immigrants coming over here is you don't hear a fucking peep out of them. It's not like the Chinese people are massively overrepresented in crime statistics. No, the crime for them is like very low, and it's like mostly drug possession because a student got caught at a night out with a little gram baggie and everything. Who gives a shit? You're a student. That's what you're supposed to fucking do. Well, you're not supposed to be stupid and get fucking caught, but you know what I mean. But still, like, the reason nobody really cares about the Chinese students is that they're not massively overrepresented in crime statistics, and the Chinese keep to themselves when they're over here. Well, I think it's because they're told to, because there was that unfortunate incident with the secret Chinese police station that was up on Socky Hall Street. I've already done a video on that. I'm not going over it again. Yeah, we actually ate dinner in there 2 weeks after the place got busted. We were in there on a Friday afternoon and the place was dead. We were literally the only people in the restaurant. And it was just all the waiters standing around looking at us, looking very uncomfortable. I just wanted to make my FBI agent, well, I was going to say FBI agent, the FBI wouldn't monitor me, it'd be MI6. or MI5 that would monitor me. And I call him Frank. So I just went in there to make Frank very nervous. Why is he going into the secret Chinese police station? I'm reporting to my handler. Anyway, elsewhere, the Home Office data shows the areas with the largest number of asylum seekers staying in hotels are Aberdeen City, Aberdeenshire, Perth and Kinross, and City of Edinburgh. Glasgow is hosting by far the biggest number of asylum seekers, with the majority living in long-term accommodation, which the local council says is costing them around £66 million in extra housing costs every year. There are so many council houses that you could build with that £66 million. You could build so many houses with that, and we wouldn't have a housing problem. But instead, we're giving it to people who are not working. They are openly dealing, they're working, they're openly dealing drugs in the street. I literally walk past drug deals every single time. Now, hey ho, I don't really, hey, drugs should be decriminalised. I'm fine with that. But in a world where everything is private property and you can move the drug dealers off of your private property, even the streets and pavements and roads, at which point, yeah, absolutely, you can do drugs out in the wastes. Out in the fucking wastes where you belong. But anyway, yeah. So this was a dumb article, but it was very the fucking headline was dumb to like draw you in. However, it was very illuminating, and the fact that we are not fixing our economic model. Basically, this is the thing: is right. I'll admit I'm a libertarian. I love money, but like I love capitalism, right? But that doesn't mean I have to like corporations, and I don't have to like crony capitalists, people that are rigging the system, right? And in this case, it's the government. The government, at the end of the day, like is a corporation. It's a corporation that has a monopoly. That's all a government is at the end of the day, right? And it's there to make money. It's there to make money for itself, which is why they came in through the threat of violence. They will act as the middleman between us and the private corporations. And we could just go to the private corporations and give them our money and get the services, but the government goes, no, you will give it to me, and I will go to the private corporations and give them your money, and I, of course, keep a nice, great big cut for myself. Those, the cocaine at the number 10 parties just doesn't pay for itself, But still, and basically, they want everybody paying as much tax as possible. Right now, if someone is at home, like not working and taking care of the kids, that person's not paying tax. Right? They don't like that. And considering that's 50% of it, in fact, I think women outnumber us very slightly. I think women are 51% of the population. I believe they are. Don't quote me on that. But basically, like, if they're like, no, we don't like that, that's half the population not paying taxes to us. That's a lot of money that we're just leaving lying on the table. So they basically engineer it to make the economy as awful as possible so that the other person in the household has to work. And if you've got both people in the household working, then that means there's no time for children. There's not even any money for children. There's no time to raise them. Like, childcare costs are astronomical at the moment. Right? So that's why nobody's having kids. And they go, oh, fuck. Our population's now retiring and not paying taxes anymore, and we need all this money, but I know we'll bring in a bunch of foreigners, and everybody says they're going to assimilate. Tell you what, then, even in the best case scenario, the foreigners are going to come over and they're going to assimilate. Right, let's say the best case scenario, the foreigners come over, they completely integrate into society, they completely assimilate, and everything's absolutely fine. Which means they're going to assimilate into the exact same opinion about the economy and go, oh fuck, it's just not feasible to have kids. And there you are, rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat, the entire thing starts again. Now, we've been boosting the economy, but we've been boosting the amount of people we have, but we're not boosting the younger generation that are coming up. And that is what the pension system relies on. It relies on them paying their national insurance payments, which is Social Security for the Yanks, and it also relies on them paying their taxes. So basically, if nobody's having kids and you're relying on a bunch of foreigners coming over here, what's going to happen is the pension system eventually will completely collapse. There's a risk of that happening in Japan right now, because there are a lot more old people collecting their pensions than there are young people paying into the system. And all that happens is, basically, I've said this many times, when there are more hands in the pot taking money than there are hands putting money into the pot, eventually pot empty, eventually no money. And people don't work for free. They don't work for no money. When no money, system collapse. And we're hurtling right towards that. And the government knows this, and they just think, that'll happen long after I'm dead, and I don't really fucking care because I don't have children.